right. Okay, so this is Jen Lee. I have with me David Litton and our guest speaker today, Meighan Brodkey. And this is Automation Hour. This is our last Automation Hour for this year. So for those who haven't joined us previously, our Automation Hour happens every other Friday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. With the end of the year, we're going to take a break for the holidays, and then we will be back in full swing January 6th. We're currently in the planning phases for the January to March session, so we'll are currently working with our future slate of guest presenters. So look for that upcoming lineup on our Salesforce Automation Hour site, as well as the Salesforce Automation Hour Success Community. And we'll also be tweeting that out once we get the January speakers lined up. And for those of you out there who have an awesome, cool process automation use case and solution to share, please go to our website and submit your idea, and then we will reach out to you for a future slot. All right, so logistic-wise, all lines will be muted. Please use the question functionality to pose your questions as Meighan goes through her presentation today, or if you have any general process automation questions as well. If we're not able to answer your questions while on the webinar, we'll continue to have those discussions offline in our success community. And we will be posting the recording as well as the deck post-session. So I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io, for sponsoring this webinar series. And here's your awesome co-hosts, our guests, Jen and David. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce Meighan as our final guest presenter of 2016. So with that, I will hand over control to Meighan.
Awesome, thanks, Jen. Hi, I'm Meighan. I am a technical architect at 7 Summits and the Seattle Women in Tech user group leader. I've been working with Salesforce since 2008, and over that time I have gone from being an admin to a developer to a technical architect, thanks to the community for the most part. So yeah, awesome. Going forward, I'm going to go with the presentation here and just get started. Excuse me, it's my first webinar, I'm so sorry. So don't mind me, I'm a bit nervous, but yes, anyway. So the use case that I have is auto-adding users to chatter groups. And so I was actually listening to a webinar that we were having at the office that was about one of the projects that another team that we have worked on. And they had worked on a community where, you know, you have community users, and when they are added to the community, they're able to add join specific, you know, chatter groups within the community. But they wanted to have it so that when the users, this was for a school with admissions, once they were accepted, that they would then be added to a specific group that is only for people with a certain status once they had been accepted. And right now, what they had been doing is they had gone in, and whenever they had updated the contact, they then go into the community, go to the group, add the user, and then they'd have to do that manually for every single person. And so instead, we're discussing the idea of using Process Builder to do that, and then taking it a step further, in addition to adding community users to a specific group, for even internal users, when you have a new hire, you know, you have your sales team, and adding them to the internal sales chatter group, and the support team adding them to the support chatter group, so that you're able to do that based on user profiles for your internal users, and then again, it works with community users as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go give an overview and then do a demo of the process and the flow, and then we can review the configuration, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So going into this, the first thing that we needed to do is we needed to come up with, who exactly needs to be added to which group. And so you have to think about your data. And then after that, we're going to be putting that data into a custom setting. And then we have the process and the visual workflow. And what I'm actually going to do is switch over to Salesforce, and we can make sure that I'm sharing the right screen. And wrong button, there we go.
Megan, it appears that we're not hearing you.
You hear me now?
Yes. So I think once you turned over to your screen, we lost audio.
Gotcha. All right. So all I done in Salesforce, I pulled up the profile. So speaking of step one, which was the data itself, you're going to want to take a look at what all your different profiles are for your users that you're actually using. And what you'll want to do is do an export of your profiles with your IDs so that you're going to be able to use that in your process and in the flow. The other thing that you'll want to do is take a look at your chatter groups and figure out of all the different chatter groups that we have. So for example, I create a few sample groups in here. There's an inside sales group, there's a marketing updates group, product development team, finance, admin updates, and then just determining who should be in each one of these groups based on those profiles. And then what I've done with that is I've taken that information and I put it into a custom setting. And I don't know how many of you have used custom settings before. They're very similar to using a custom object, except they're able to have a few different advantages when it comes to the development side. And one of the ways that we're using them here is very similar to using it as you would a normal custom object, and that's just to have a custom field for the chatter group ID and a custom field for the profile. And when doing this, I actually added fields for the chatter group name and the profile name. Not really necessary, but they're there. But you do have to have the profile ID and the chatter group ID. And the way we're going to use the custom setting is in our flow. And so the first thing we need to do to actually set up the process is to create the flow, and then the flow is going to be launched by the process. First thing we have is the fast lookup, and we're using the fast lookup because we have multiple options that can be pulled. You can have, the profiles can have multiple groups that they're added to. So we're actually just pulling up that custom setting, and we're going for anything where the profile ID matches the user profile ID. And then we're going to put them into the assigned groups alignment S-object collection. And an S-object collection is just a group of records. And the fields that we want to hold from that object are the ID, the chatter group ID, and the role. And we're going to use those from that S-object collection. We're going to go into a loop. Now, the loop is used to go from having all those records that we put into the collection to look at them just one by one. And so we're going to be looking through the assigned group alignments to one group alignment record. And then we're going to just assign the variables that we need. we have one group member that we're trying to make for this chatter group, and we're going to get the member ID from that user that we've just created. And then we have the group ID, which we got off the custom setting that we just did the fast lookup for, and we're going to use that chatter group ID field. We then have the role for the user, and in chatter groups you can have a role of admin or standard. We want to apply whatever role was assigned in that custom setting. And then you also have the notification frequency. I actually have just used the pick list value here for this one. My theory is that users can be told daily what the updates are for all of their groups, and if they want to be told less frequently, they can go in and update that. But this way you can make sure that everything is getting to their inbox. Now that we've assigned all of those variables to one record, we want to take that record and add it to a new group of records, which is another S-object collection. And we're going to call that our collaboration group members. And all we're doing is adding this one group member into that collection. And with the loop, it's going to go through each one of those records that we found until it finishes all of them, and we'll have collected all of the chatter group member records that we need to create in that S-object collection. The loop will know when it's done, when it's gone through all the records. And at the very end, we're going to do a fast create. We're going to use fast create because, again, there could be multiple records. If you use just the record create, that's going to create one record at a time. With the fast create, we can take all of those records that we put into that collection and create them all at once. And we're going to just, you'll mark the fast lookup as where it starts, and then we have to go and look at how we're going to launch the flow. And so this is actually going to be done with a process, and pretty basic process. We have the user, which is the object that we're starting with, and we're going to fire the process whenever a record is created or edited. The criteria for the action is when a user becomes active. You can add additional criteria here based on any other sort of needs that you have, like perhaps just internal users would need to be added, or anyone that is just on the sales team or that's in a specific group that's using Chatter if you haven't rolled it out to anybody. But right now we're just going with is active is true. And then we have the actions that need to happen. Now to actually launch the flow, if we were to put it in as an immediate action, we would not be able to have the flow fire. You end up getting an error for a mixed DML, which is when you try and update something after having a setup object updated. So you can't update the user and then update or create the chatter group members. So we're actually going to just have it be scheduled, and we'll do it for 0 hours after the last modified date, which means it's going to fire right away anyway. But we're going to be able to avoid the error by having that scheduled action. And then the action is just to launch the flow. And so we have this user, which is the S-object variable we started with for the fast lookup, where we have the user's profile. So we're just going to be assigning this user to the user we just created. And then once we have that active, we can actually create a user over here. And so I can deactivate this test user so that we have enough licenses. My demo org, fabulous. So we have Molly Marketing, and we switch it over to a Salesforce user license with the marketing user profile, and then we can go to the marketing team for her role. And so it's actually the profile we're selecting right here is what is going to end up deciding what group she's added to. And so by selecting the marketing profile, anything that we assigned for that profile ID into chatter groups is going to end up being added to this user, and she'll be created with them. And then we'll want to get rid of this so we don't get an error. and then we can save. Of course, it's already used. And it's almost marketing. All right, and then since it is firing based on a scheduled action, it will take a few seconds before it actually ends up firing and the user is added to the chatter group. But when you go over and check the chatter group, you may have to refresh. But the user will then be added to any of the groups that were marked to that user profile. All right. Like I said, it takes a minute to have it happen. Yes. Anyways, so that's pretty much the gist of the process. And as I sit here and I wait for this to load, because of the scheduled action and having to wait for the flow. Anybody have any questions to start?
So we do have one question that's been submitted up, another one coming in by Dennis. Which tool would you use, Visual Flow, Process Builder, etc., to automate sending a welcome chatter post to new members of chatter groups? A key requirement is that welcome posts must come from a specific user, the community manager, i.e. Joe Smith.
So it's for specifically to have the person that's doing the posting be Joe Smith for the post. That's what we're going for here.
I think what
okay.
Or at least how I interpreted that was it was wanting to send a welcome email when somebody is added into a chatter group. So if you created a new member of, let's say, that finance chatter group, having a welcome chatter post to them after they've been added as the member.
So I'm seeing a welcome chatter post to new members of chatter groups where the welcome post has to come from a specific user, the community manager.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing email. So yeah, awesome. Okay. Really quick, I just wanted to point out that now this flow is fired, that you can see that there are now 2 members in the marketing updates group and 2 in the admin updates group. So sorry, but anyway, but to answer that question, so to do a new chatter post, I would use Process Builder for the most part, just because of the fact that you have the option to do a chatter post right there in Process Builder. But with the requirement of having the post come from a specific user, I don't know, Jen, do you happen to know if you can set the person that is firing the process for the created by chatter post?
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I've not used chatter post a lot. Go ahead, David.
Process Builder will run with system permissions, but it will run as the user who triggered that Process Builder.
Okay.
So in terms of saying always having it come from, in this case, Joe Smith would have had to edit the record that triggered this Process Builder to happen. But I also don't know if we can have a Process Builder fire off of a chatter group membership.
So if we can take a look if we can.
Yeah, let's do a quick check.
Awesome. I'm not seeing it.
It's feed for chatter posts, but there is some limitations. I mean, you don't have the feed item comments within Process Builder, so sometimes when you're dealing with automating stuff off of chatter, you can have some issues if you need something to be triggered, because Flow can reference like comments, but Process Builder can't trigger off of a comment, so you'd have to have Apex if you needed something to trigger off of an actual chatter comment.
Yeah, but to have a new member when they're added, to actually have it. So if there was a feed item that's created when new members are added, could probably fire it off of that feed item. Couldn't you?
You could.
But then again, we're going back to it's going back to the community manager. Would it be the person posting it unless they did the editing?
Now, if this was something that, let's say you wanted to automate from the user record, where the manager, Joe Smith, clicked on the user and checked the box to add them, you could set it up where it automatically adds them to the chatter group, and then you have a chatter post on that as well.
Yeah.
That would be maybe one way to solve it with the clicks, but if you want to do something else, it might be, going into the Apex world.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, if it were to do it off of, say, the process that I created for adding the new members, I mean, you could do a post in that flow at the end to welcome them to each one of those groups as well. But again, yeah, that running user thing is difficult.
Yeah, Dennis just clarified. So he meant, I think, more so when somebody was created to just have something on their main chatter feed. So. Yeah.
So when you create a new user, if you were to have the user as the object for your process, and then to have it, fire when created, you could then have a post onto their user feed that right in Process Builder to say, welcome to the community.
There's another question out there from Victor. Will the process fail if, say, the user was already in one of the chatter groups?
Yeah, so this would be for an instance if you were to just be adding users into a group. If actually putting this into play in an org, I would add into the flow, most likely, that it would also do a check of all of the probably do a fast lookup for all of the collaboration group members that have this user's ID as the member ID. And then you could filter those out so that they don't get assigned to the collection. And that way, if by chance you were doing this on, let's say, just not new users and users when they are, possibly changing roles in the future or something of the such, you'd be able to avoid having any sort of problems there.
All right, next question comes from Pratam. Can we use Flow to carry forward a contact from lead conversion to account contact relationship?
Yes. The flow would need to be triggered off of the process builder, but you'd be able to reference the account contact relationship from within Flow. And if I understand correctly, I think I ran into an issue earlier this week actually with that exact scenario where you had private contacts or an orphaned contact without an account. Those are unable to be added as an account or account contact relationship. It was also more of a data, like a dirty data issue, as opposed to they actually wanted that to be how it functioned, but just keep that in mind.
Next question is from Kevin. can you add people to a group using the same methodology if they interact with specific posts or records, i.e. a post of automation hour is this week would cause interactions to add people to the automation hour group?
Yeah, so great question, Kevin. So yeah, depending on the actual type of activity that you'd be wanting to add the people to a group for, you would be able to. So for example, if you have a feed item that is created, and let's just go down here. As you can see, I was testing the comment idea just the other day. But if you were to have users where, let's say, they have a post and their post specifically says, #automation hour in it, then you could have them then added to a group where they are then in the automation hour group because they mentioned it. So I wouldn't do it in the same way with the custom setting, so to speak, if it's going to be limited. If it's just going to be for specific terms, 1 or 2, you could do process builder. But if you're looking at making an intense matrix where if by chance they mention any of these 6 words, they want to be in this group, that kind of stuff, then yeah, I would definitely take a look at the idea of adding a little bit more to that custom setting and enhancing it, but you could definitely do it.
Great. Are there any other questions from the audience? Give it a minute or so.
And it can be questions not necessarily related to the demo we just saw, anything around process automation.
We have one here from Eric. Can you revisit custom settings?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to, actually. So let's jump back over into the setup and go over to custom settings. And so yeah, so custom settings are in the setup area. They're specifically for admins. You need to have the ability to customize application to access them. So they wouldn't be things that you would want any regular user accessing. They're found under develop, and then you just go to custom setting. And then there are actually 2 different types of custom settings. There is something called a hierarchy custom setting, and then there's a list custom setting. And the hierarchy custom setting, it's set up to specifically assign a set of values to, one profile or one user, versus a list where you're able to assign any type of variable to any type of field because of the fact that, it's a list and you're deciding what it's related to, versus that hierarchy where you're stuck having it related to some sort of profile or user or the org. So when you go in to create the custom setting, you would do it just like you do any custom object. You would have your label, which would be test custom setting, and then you would have your object name, and you'll go over to list. And then if you want to be able to, so here, it's probably better written here. So if you wanted to be able to have it so that it was protected, like in a managed package, you would go with the protected option. But you'll want to go with public when you're making yours, and then make sure to add a description to explain what it is. And you'll press save. And that's actually creating the actual quote-unquote object. And then you, just like with a custom object, you have fields you can create. You'll notice couple of the things you don't have with custom settings. You do not have formulas, you do not have tick lists, and you don't have lookups. So, if you're trying to decide, should I use a custom object or a custom setting, you need to relate this to a lookup field. If you need to have a formula, or if you need to have, a pick list, you'd want to go with the custom object. But if you go with text, and you can go with your field name for whatever it may be, very common one would be the ISO code. And you know, this way, if you by chance have your countries that you have on accounts, and if you need to have those countries, you know, specifically related to the ISO code, the most common example that I see is to then have the country listed as the object name, and then the ISO code is the custom field. And that's a great example of a use for a list custom setting. But what I ended up doing is, for the custom setting in the example, is I'm using an 18-character text field for the ID. But that is because, you know, you can't actually look up a chatter group in a lookup field. So that was one of the reasons why I ended up going with the custom setting, is you wouldn't actually be able to use the lookup field anyway. But yeah, do you have specific questions about custom settings?
See if Eric has any additional feedback. Okay. Just curious how it's used in your example. All right. There's another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so really quick, Eric, the way that it's used in the example that I had is with the chatter group alignment custom setting. I'm holding the chatter group ID and the profile ID and the role that I want to have that user have in each one of the chatter groups. And then in the flow, when we are doing that fast lookup, we're looking up that custom setting to find out what the chatter group ID is and the role for that user for that specific group. And then we're assigning it, the variables we got off the custom setting, to the chatter group member record. And that's how it's used in the example.
Great. Another question, is there any possibility to invoke web service API call using process or flow? I don't have any experience with that. Either of you? No?
I'm assuming that the web service API call could grab, like, you would be handled through Apex, which you could then fire it off that way. I'm just taking a shot in the dark, though. I've not tried to do that, but that probably would work.
You may also want to post that question out on Salesforce Automation Hour, and we can see if someone else in the community can confirm whether it's possible or not.
There is actually a Stack Exchange post about this topic. I'm going to pull it up really quick. It was web service API visual workflow. And then was this one. Awesome. So yeah, and then it looks like that it can be done using a Apex class for a plugin. And you would just need to copy and paste that code into your org as an Apex class to have a plugin that would let you give that a try, keeping in mind what they have for their example and updating it for whatever your needs are.
All right. So Jordan just asked the question, realizing that there's also platform cache, and you might be able to elaborate on how, or I guess on what platform cache is and how it's used different from custom settings. We probably want to also maybe throw custom metadata types into that mix as well. I know you love those, Jen.
So yeah, so there are a number of times when you can have your list custom settings could actually end up being a custom metadata type. The advantage to a custom metadata type is you can actually move that information with either the package or across orgs. And I mean, Jen, since you're the expert, Jen, what are your thoughts?
The best thing is with custom metadata type, if you're not looking at like the hierarchy in terms of a user or a profile, then I would go custom metadata type, because like Meighan said, it's the actual records are, you could put it into a change set, versus custom settings, when you do like a refresh, then you have to load back in those custom settings, because otherwise they just get wiped out. I don't have much experience with platform cache, though.
So platform cache functions similar to both of those. The difference with platform cache is you're not actually like creating the record inside of Salesforce to where you know it's there. So platform cache, you have by default, I think it's 10 gigs, I think, or something like that. But you've got your default limit. You can buy more, which is the nice thing. I'm not sure if you can buy more custom metadata type, but the platform cache is a little scarier in the sense that you could potentially overwrite the data that you have. So you're typically going to have like something push into that platform cache, and then you'd be able to reference it. The speed of platform cache is going to be faster than either of the other two. So that's kind of, if you're doing something with like a Visualforce page or Lightning component, you're going to get a quicker return time on your queries through the platform cache than the custom metadata type. However, there's the trade-off of, are you sure that the data that you're expecting to be in there is actually there? And you could technically use like platform cache as the first, and if you don't find the data, you could maybe use custom settings or metadata to be the fallback. But platform cache is a little bit more developer focused as opposed to those two, which are a little bit easier to digest for admins and people not writing code. And there's a great trailhead on it. So there's like 3 short little modules on platform cache, and I would recommend that. There's also a great YouTube video on it from Dreamforce, I think last year, right after it got released, because I think platform cache was winter 16, if I remember correctly, or it might have been, I think winter 16. So I would recommend, if you want to learn more about it, go in there.
Hey, any other questions out there? Good mix of questions this time. All right, I don't see any new ones coming in. Okay, I think everyone's up. Hold on. Irene has a question. Is it possible to auto add a topic to each post?
Yes, it is, actually. So, second here. So I actually have a process here. And what it does is it assigns a topic to posts in the community. And so if you take a look at, let's see which one of these, it would be the top one. And when you have a feed item, when it's created, and I use the example for this one specifically when they have a text post. Anytime a text post is created, it then launches this flow, and using the feed item and the name of the topic that I want to assign to that post, I then can use the flow. I can then use a flow, not the flow, but I can then use a flow that looks at the do, here we go. It looks at that. Why is this not loading? There we go. Awesome. That looks up that specific topic using the topic's name that we assigned from the process and the network ID for that community. And then it takes the ID for the topic that it finds, and it'll then create the topic on the post using the topic assignment object. And the entity ID would be the feed item, network ID is your community, and then the topic ID is that topic ID we just looked up. And then you have the topic assigned to your post.
All right, from Dennis, just to confirm, Process Builder and Visual Flow are the two tools I would need to automate sending a welcome chatter post to the new user's profile chatter feed and have the post come from a specific user.
So you'd be able to use Process Builder when with the main object of the user for the object that you're starting on, and then for your action criteria, if this was the user, your action criteria would then be you could use a formula with is new, and for your immediate action, you can create an action to have a post happen on that user's feed. But you wouldn't be able to set the post coming from a specific user unless that user is the one doing the action of creating the user. Does that make sense?
And I've seen it where you could kind of create like a scheduler, I guess, where you could have maybe them run in batch, and you could log in as your managers and check a box that fires a flow to go query and see all the chatter posts that they need to make. And you could maybe set that up to run daily or hourly or however often. That way it would come from a specific user, but that's kind of tedious to have to log into all the different users and set it up like that.
But yeah, you'd be able to. Does that answer your question, then, Dennis?
So thanks. All right. Maybe this might be the last one from Larry. How difficult is it to create workflows off HTML tracking? I would like to create an email alert for the sender to follow up when an email has been opened 3 or more times.
So this would be based on having the when you have a contact or a lead and you send them an HTML email and the user ends up opening that email 3 or more times, then you can usually track that in that HTML email section. At that point in time, you would want to have an email sent to the owner to let them know that the email has been opened up X number of times. So I'm not 100% on, I'm checking right now actually, when you're creating a process, if you're able to, do you guys know offhand if you can base that off an HTML email?
No, you only have an email message as the option, which I don't think has it.
So I'm going to take a quick look. We have on the email message, yeah, that would be related to a case if it's email message, isn't it? I think so.
I think they just, it depends if you've made your email like the full supported object or not. So I know some orgs don't have that, and it's only assigned to the case.
So I don't think that if you're not able to actually base well, I guess what you could do is for the emails that are being sent, are they being sent by users individually, or are you doing a mass email? Larry?
What would be the object that would be stored on per the HTTP? Like, I'm looking through the documentation. I don't even see an object with a clear label for that. I've not tried to do this before.
And so, HTML email tracking. No. Oh, here we go. So we have the HTML email status and an email. I wonder if it is if it's just the activity history object that has those fields on it. So if we go to document, and object. I'm so sorry, I'm one of those people that cannot end up not looking something up. If we look here at activity space, yeah, so that would be on the activity history object. So if you were to actually create your process and base that on, I wonder if you can base it on just activity instead of leader task. And then you'd be able to launch a flow to do that. I bet. I'm going to see if we have activity as an object. No, so we don't have activity, but yeah, I guess in that case, I mean, you would have to probably go with Apex in that point in time, unless you were going to have another action that happens because you have an email sent. Like the task object has the emails that you send on it. And so if you were to use the task and over in task have it be that the type is email, you might be able to then launch a flow that would go through and find the activity history record to update that, or to use it based on the contact or lead last activity date to then do a fast lookup of all of the activities in the activity history, looking for the HTML email to base it off of that. So yeah, you could do it that way. So yeah, if you were to base it off the contact or lead when the last activity date is changed, you'd be able to then go from there to use a flow to determine what the related activity history records are, to then have it so that a flow would then have an email sent at the record being open 3 times.
And there's a chance that, as I'm looking at it a different way, you might be able to use something like the declarative rollup summary plugin and set up like a batch job to run like nightly and roll up any time that you have more than 3 opens on an activity to check a box, which could then do your email alert. So I think there's a few different ways you could go about trying to solve it.
Yeah, it would be possible, even if it was sent individually or if it was part of a mass email. There are a few different ways you could go about setting up that workflow using Process Builder and Flow to get that set up.
All right, I think that's it for questions. So thank you so much, Meighan, for presenting. And and I will just talk to everybody else in January when we post additional presenters. So have a happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for joining today.